Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Welcome, my friends. You are in for an amazing treat. You know who's here? Jessica Pettit, author of the amazingly good book, Almost Doing Good, and the subtitle really seals the deal: Doing the Best You Can with What You Have Some of the Time. Yep. Jessica Pettit, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, Newman, I'm so honored to be here. You can't even believe it. I am in awe of how much your advice has shifted and shaped my ability to launch a book, run a business, and speak my truth. So, hello.
Thank you. And hello. So I want to go back to book number 1, because you wrote a fantastic book a few years ago. And the fantastic book from a few years ago is Good Enough Now. And you somehow felt, I think we need part 2. I think we need to finish the conversation. And this is an amazingly great book. First book was very good. This book I'm going to call amazingly good. Tell us about the journey of and the reason for writing this second book at this moment in time.
100%. So first book, Good Enough Now. Mostly I wrote for individuals to do their own work, because I realized I was surrounded by people who were helping me grow and be a better person and understand who and how I wanted to be in the world. And I wanted to kind of document some of those processes that I had been encouraged and supported to use and do on behalf of my own personal growth, right? Good Enough Now. Sounds great. Then as my own work really shifted into corporate and association audiences, I consistently am working with leaders who are failing. And I don't believe anybody is doing DEI stuff well. And that, I think the most disturbing truth is that most of my clients are terrified of being first and are overly confident that they are not the worst. And there's no momentum starting from that place. There's no trying. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to use their good-intentioned and failing initiatives as directions in the right place so that we can build momentum from somewhere.
Yes.
So it's kind of the prequel to Good Enough Now, if you will, on an organizational level.
So let me ask you this. DEI, and again, for the folks that are not familiar with that term, first of all, what the hell's wrong with you? Second of all, diversity, equity, and inclusion has gotten a real bad rap. It's gotten a real bad rap. There has been political pressure. There has been corporate pressure. There has been shareholder and customer pressure. You know about the whole Tractor Supply disaster? Right, Tractor Supply is the company that were putting in all kinds of amazing DEI initiatives, and there was some agitator that was using that as an activist investor to foment rebellion among the shareholders, and so they backed off because they were scared that as good intentioned as they were, and as much traction as they had developed, no pun based on Tractor Supply, they were being called out for being too woke, too DEI. So this is the environment that we're in. Like it or not, this is the environment that we're in. I'm going to posit, and I want you to push back on this if you disagree, that what you're teaching and what you're helping corporate clients with and what you wrote this book about is about leadership, culture, recruiting, retention, productivity, collaboration, teamwork, and innovation Is there a byproduct that could be categorized as, well, yeah, this will help you with some diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever, treating people fairly, making them feel they have a seat at the table, making them empowered, not being overly critical, having room for a diversity of opinions and perspectives and standpoints? Great. But I wouldn't call it a DEI book, and I wouldn't call your expertise, DEI expertise, I would call it human leadership expertise. Am I crazy?
I don't think I mean, you are certifiable. Yes.
But not about this.
Not about this. So the two things I would say, and this is going to probably equally piss off DEI people as anti-DEI people.
Perfect. Let's piss them all off.
Perf. So number one, the tractor company you talked about, there are thousands of examples of companies that pulled all the DEI during George Bush. Then they put them all back, and then they pulled them again because COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then George Floyd was murdered, and they started bringing them all back. And now they're firing all them first. And now in this political climate, they're being dissolved, and they'll be back, right? So I just want to state first that DEI is almost always a very low-hanging, reactionary, performative victim, right? So it's performative in doing it, and it's performative in no longer doing it.
The pendulum swingeth.
Right, exactly. And the key is the doing of the it. And the doing of the it is performative in the sense that it's not dismantling every system of oppression and creating something brand new. We are maybe redecorating the Titanic.
Yeah.
And so the pendulum is swinging between not doing anything that really matters and doing something that doesn't really matter. So it's not a big swing.
Yeah.
So when I needed to write this book, part of the reason is that what you just said about human leadership, I wish I didn't need this job, right? I am constantly working towards my unemployment, and yet here I am with lots of job security. It's funny is that when I approached an actual publisher to publish this book instead of self-publishing it, they said the same thing. I don't think this is a DEI book, and they wanted me to make it more DEI. So I was like, exactly what does that mean for you as a publisher? And I needed like a vocabulary list and all this other academic junk, which as an academic who used to do all that junk is not effective.
Right.
So that is exactly what I did not want to do. So I was like, I will take my balls and go home and self-publish. Because what human leadership, to use your language, is about is recognizing that you do not know everything. You can learn from somebody else, and you have a scope of responsibility that is likely not the entire world because we're tired. So maybe our scope is just the stakeholders, but stakeholders is a little bigger than Milton Friedman's shareholders. So you're at least talking about your local community, but now we can do something, right? And so that is really why I wrote the book. I wish it was just human leadership, but most humans don't feel compelled to do this kind of work because they think someone else is going to do it.
I also want to ask you about, because I think what you've done, let's go with the premise for a moment that it is a DEI book. Maybe it's not DEI enough. We don't know. We're not here to judge. But let's say that it is.
Maybe it's almost DEI.
Maybe it's almost. Maybe it's almost. But you talk in here about this is not a simple issue. Everyone wants to make this simple. Everyone wants to, okay, let's hire more people that look like that. Let's hire more folks that come from there. Only 6% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. Let's get more women in the C-suite, or whatever the issue is, right? There's 100 different variations of this problem, probably 1,000 different variations of this problem. This is a complex, multifaceted, multi-pronged problem. And I want to congratulate you for you did not dumb it down. In fact, if I would say anything, you've smartened it down. You've smartened it down, meaning that you've taken this very complex, age-old problem in corporate America, And you have simplified, popularized, and democratized this in a way that most executives can read this book. Number one, recognize their own organization and their own leaders and probably themselves. And number two, have a playbook for starting to make baby step incremental improvements.
Wow.
Knowing that it's so complicated, when you're talking to a corporate executive, how do they talk about the complexity and the stuckness and why they haven't solved it yet?
So let me ask you a clarifying question and I'll answer the question.
Sure.
Are they asking me this question by themselves or is someone else in the room?
let's start with the easier one. They're by themselves. Like it's a phone call or a Zoom call with a prospect, and they're like, "Yeah, Jessica, I'll tell you, this is really complex in here. This is really sticky and tricky here at my company," as if it's not sticky and tricky everywhere else. So, okay, and then your comeback to that is yes, and
right. So this is really the do good triangle that I came up with by being so frustrated at Kresley's fraud triangle, which I'm going to get nerdy for just a second, but the Kresley's fraud triangle is used in accounting. I learned this when I was getting my MBA inside of COVID, and it stuck in my brain so much, and I couldn't figure out why. And I think its ingredients aren't how to commit fraud. Its ingredients are how to be disruptive.
Yeah.
And surprise, I don't think disruption is always for the bad. I think you can disrupt things for good. So I started going down this rabbit hole in my research on whistleblowers, right? So like if these three elements are why fraudsters, usually accountants, commit fraud, then I discovered that whistleblowers fall into the same category because it's disruptive. So now I want to disrupt for good, right? So then the element of recognition, I think, is where most of my CEOs by themselves are really struggling. And it's because they are often not in a position to experience any of the problems that are coming to their attention or that are crossing their desk. They're paid too much. They are often white men, frankly, or white women who have learned to navigate a white man's world. They're usually very well educated and they're not experiencing the complaints, which ultimately is when you said I smartened it down. This past week, I was at a conference and somebody said something very similar at this comment. And that is the television show Undercover Boss. The reason why it's popular is because that boss has no idea how to use a Slurpee machine.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've smartened it down to take it away from the CE role to be okay that you don't know what a frontline employee experiences.
Yeah.
You have no idea. Like if we take you have no idea what it takes to look for parking because you've been assigned a parking space, right? So instead of being threatened by the lack of knowledge, can you be empowered by the lack of knowledge and actually start listening to it? And the answer is usually, hey, no. And then now we need to get into like, what is wrong? Why can't you listen to something you don't know?
Yeah.
So if they're by themselves, that is usually the entry point. If they are not by themselves, they're with their board of trustees, their, C-suite leadership team, etc. They usually feel underprepared. They don't even know their own policies or procedures. So preparation is one of the sides of the triangle. They have no idea what their company stands for, what it believes, how they define their culture. How does that work? Is that in the onboarding program? Because they've outsourced all that stuff. Even when they, as an outside consultant, they don't read my report. They don't know. An annual report is a marketing piece, not actually a review of what the company did. So they're woefully unprepared as a team. Or the third variable, they are peer pressured to react. And a knee-jerk reaction is probably going to cause more harm than an actual intentional response. So preparation, recognition, and response, that's the triangle. To disrupt for good, i.e. the do good triangle.
Well, and also you talked early in the book about one of the reasons that you put this together is because of CEO Chuck.
Oh.
Can you please tell us the CEO Chuck story? Or just the premise of
Yes.
the CEO Chuck, probably quote unquote, not his real name. Names have been changed to protect the goofy. But tell us about CEO Chuck and all the CEO Chucks that are out there.
So CEO Chuck, in the stories, and I tell lots of stories and I use case studies in the book. So the singular CEO Chuck, who's not the avatar for all of them, was a client that called me in a raging panic. And for lack of better words, they had an internal post posted to their all employee channel on Slack that cost them, according to him, cost them more productivity than COVID did. One internal post. When working with him, and other focus groups, one-on-one conversations, town halls, like all of these kind of things, what became very clear was a belief that he, as a founder, had of this organization was so strong in him and people like him that they actually had no idea how diverse their company was. In their fight for diversity, they had completely left behind people they employed in kind of the idea of who their employees would be. So to be specific, if you were a white, secular, liberal, progressive person, you were in. You were the avatar of the company, and the company won global awards for being this amazingly inclusive place. So it turns out they're evangelical Christian employees. In the United States, we would say a homophobic or transphobic employees, but they had employees in 8 different countries, some of which it is illegal to be gay or trans. So I don't know if it counts as being homophobic and transphobic if it's illegal in that particular country, because the cultures are different.
Yeah.
But they went from 8 employees to 80,000 employees and didn't take into consideration that as they're hiring people around the world, Muslim employees, Jewish employees, not white employees, conservative employees were not welcomed at this incredibly inclusive place to work. And so I began to advocate for them to feel included. Because if the secular, liberal, progressive employees and leadership are going to wear t-shirts that like bring your whole self to work, that t-shirt needs to apply to everyone in the company.
Yeah.
And Chuck did not acknowledge outside of his founder circle how much protection he was surrounded by to understand anything about his own company. So I really think this next year, I think I'm going to lean into fast-growing companies that are aspiring or registered B Corps where the founders still work there. Because I think that's a massive gap between what they think they are doing and what's actually happening in the workplace. And let's start there.
Yeah. Wow. That is a great niche as far as a life stage of a company, because they're big enough to be serious, but they're not so big that one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. And it's so disconnected and so corporate that, you know, good luck changing the value system in a giant behemoth like a much larger firm.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we use Slack as the metaphor, in this case, it is both a metaphor and a reality, is that the upper leadership started Slack so that they could communicate when they weren't all sitting in one person's garage.
Yeah.
80,000 people now have access to that same Slack. They never changed the controls for an all employee text.
So
what they did change,
anyone could send anything to everyone.
One person sent one message to all employees.
Wow.
And the only thing that did change is those founders no longer used Slack because they'd hired other people to handle everything.
Sure.
So it took them 17 hours to respond to this disruptive Slack because nobody knew how to log in. Nobody saw it. They had to go get it. Then they had to get a password, download the app again. Now they saw it. And then they saw all the comments. Well, how do we say something? What are we doing? Totally ill prepared. And their reaction was nothing, to do nothing. And so it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse because they didn't even know how to recognize the problem, and they certainly weren't prepared for it.
Yes.
That is why I screamed at him, as I tell in the beginning of the book. I was so angry that I said, you have to stop spit polishing a landmine. And what I mean by that is that spit polishing is kind of the best practice you're really good at. But just because you're really good at it doesn't make it the right activity. And in this case is very dangerous. Stop.
Yeah.
Don't make it worse. So it's almost doing good. Welcome and therapy. Co-pays.
That's it. That is it.
Hang on. Let's back up the truck. Beep, 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 beep. Listen, I have a brand new sales book out there. You got to get your hands on it. It is awesome. It is amazing. It is fantastic. It is useful, practical, actionable, and a ton of bonuses are waiting for you over at doitselling.com. Grab your copy right now and grab all the bonuses, goodies, companion tools, and downloads that go with the book. You'll love it. I guarantee it.
I want to jump back into the humanizing component here, because there's so many brilliant parts to this book, but I'm going to pull out yet another brilliant part, which is the 6 elements of culture change, which you do I think a fantastic job of describing. And a lot of people wouldn't even know. It's like, okay, corporate values, go. And then they just give you the, whatever's on the plaque in the lobby. And it doesn't connect viscerally. It doesn't connect viscerally to the people at the top. And it sure as hell doesn't connect viscerally to anyone, from the boardroom to the break room. But I want to go through these 6 things and whatever highlights you want to share about each. But it's organizational. So the 6 elements of culture change. This is your framework. That's totally brilliant. Or organizational style. It's like, our organization has a style. It's like, yeah, it has a style. Mm-hmm. You might not recognize it because you're inside the fishbowl, but it has a style. Artifacts, customs, norms, language, beliefs, and values.
Yes.
Which ones are the trickiest to surface? Let's start with that. Which ones are the trickiest for people to recognize and say, oh, yeah, that is what we have going on here?
Customs and norms, I would say. Okay. That's a good question. I actually think it lands almost like a trick question. So especially when I'm working with like a leadership group, is I'm like, well, just define your culture. And I'll be like, wait, don't say anything out loud. Let me give you this handout and then just fill it in, right? Like just write it in. And they all very confidently grab their pens and they're all ready to go. So they start off with organizational style, which should be the easiest one because it's not the hierarchy, right? Like, now, what's funny is they'll spend 35 minutes looking for their org chart that they've never looked at. They have no idea if it's current, right? But an organizational style is really about like communication, social capital, right? Like, can I just walk into your office? Do I have to have an appointment?
Yeah.
I remember when one of the jobs that I had, I am originally from Texas. Another new employee was from Texas. And I found out that she also had a very similar sober date as me. And so I reached out to her and was like, let's go to lunch, right? This is almost a personal lunch. Texans gone sober, right? And I got a letter of insubordination because I reached out to someone who was at a different job level than me and in a different silo than me without informing my boss first.
That's a serious story.
100% serious.
Oh my gosh.
Now, part of that is org chart, but really what that is micromanaging who am I having lunch with and who am I building relationships with, because my boss was very threatened by anybody having relationships with people she didn't have relationships with. That is organizational style. But imagine how that trickles down into your workplace culture and how people experience that level of anxiety and insecurity. So we'll just start at the beginning. The reason why norms and customs, I said, is probably the hardest one, is that it's written down and not followed, or followed and not written down.
Yes.
So the example I use in the book, and this is potentially a little crass for some people who may be listening, but if you work in an office building, or I'm going to say if you have 2 bathrooms in your house, there is a possibility one of them is for pooping. Nobody has explicitly stated this, but if you're going to that bathroom, everybody knows what you're doing, and you get to be in there as long as you need to, and you take care of it. It's got air freshener and it's handled. Quickie bathroom is for other activities.
Yeah.
That is usually not documented, but
Not
you
in my
find out
house.
about it by doing the wrong one in the wrong space.
Yeah.
So no matter how good your onboarding process is or your new employee handbook, there are customs and norms that uniforms, I think, is a great example. There's almost always a dress code that's documented, but then
Yes.
there's what you can actually wear. Right.
Yeah.
So really understanding how nebulous that is, and then how your new employees are navigating it. And then extra bonus is, let's say you have an internal promotion. Are the norms and culture the same at this new place? Is the language different? I had another job that when you, this is basically pre-internet, but whenever I were to edit something, there was a color of ink I was supposed to use when making edits to my boss's memos so that my boss could keep track of which draft it was. So red was first, then green, and then blue was like final touches. I did not know this.
Yeah.
Norms and customs. That's the trickiest one, I think.
Well, it's also about it's funny, unspoken expectations and unarticulated questions, right? So I have an expectation, but I'm not gonna let you know. And then unarticulated questions, it's, I have a question, but God forbid I ask you and get clarification because I'm supposed to know.
Supposed to know is actually one of the best customs in any organization, because when we think like, well, it's just common sense. So even like, let's take one of my clients just realized that they had never trained any of their employees how to answer the phone. Now, they started, everyone was working from home, and so it's not like a call center, right?
Yeah.
But they are coming back to the office, but 60% of their employees had never been to the office before.
Wow.
So like they forgot to tell people how to answer the phone. And so then you have people who don't typically necessarily talk on the phone very much, answering the office line with zero training and no knowledge of how to do it. And the other people are like, I can't believe you don't know how to do this. Well, they were never told.
That would be an unarticulated expectation. Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or you should just know that it's always done this way.
Yes, I know. Terrific episode here, but have you seen our latest web training? Oh my goodness, pop over there right now, or as soon as you're done listening to this episode, it's doitmarketing.com/webinar. See you over there. Back to the good stuff.
Tell me a little bit, because I've got a couple more questions about the methodology and the philosophy, but share with me, how do people work with you? What's on the menu of investable opportunities? What is small? What is medium? What is large? What is supersize?
Supersize and or large, I think, kind of go with themselves. So I do some retainer consulting that is usually around crisis management.
Okay.
I generally don't like people. And so the longest most of my consulting contracts last is about 3 months.
Okay.
And 3 months, I work very fast and very deep. And so if we do everything I think we can get a very good feeling of what is missing and how to prioritize free to cheap things that you could do to decrease the gap between what you think it's like to work here and what it's actually like to work here, right?
Yeah.
I can do that in 3 months. I also find out in 3 months how dedicated or usually not dedicated the organization I'm working with, their leadership team, is actually in making any difference. And by the time I realize that they're not that dedicated into making a difference, I'm out. So that's like 3 months.
But the check has cleared the bank, so you're good.
Yep, cash all checks.
That's
Now,
it.
sometimes it will lead to, we really liked that. Can we check in every once in a while? And I will talk them into a retainer contract where I'm in their pocket if they need me. If there is a crisis inside of a retainer contract, I treat that basically like a full-time job until we get through the crisis.
Yeah.
If they have one, right? Otherwise, the other end of the spectrum, keynoting is kind of my marketing. It is one of my favorite things to do. And I usually am a closing keynoter, and then I upsell emceeing the event, which really helps me figure out what are the actual pain points of the attendees or the members or the employees at the event, which makes my closing keynote better. And I can pitch consulting work, ongoing education, that kind of stuff.
So, and then in between, speaking of education, training, workshop, seminar series, that kind of thing, or no?
Sure. I say sure in the sense that I think I have a 4-part series that I will do. I usually do it as a cover for the actual consulting work that I'm doing to build relationships.
So it's baked in usually.
Yeah, I want people to come to my focus groups, but they need to know who I am, and I'm not just another DEI consultant. So I will do those, specifically virtual programs, because I also like to have something that's available for everybody at every price point.
Yes.
If I got to choose, I would MC events, be the closing speaker that spins off into more keynoting and consulting work.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here. So I have, our friend Cy Wakeman.
Yes, love me some Cy Wakeman.
So Cy gets all kinds of requests from all kinds of clients, some of which are not her strength and not her preference. So I learned this from her. I'm sharing it with you. I'm sharing it with our audience. She has no hesitation saying the following line. That is a really terrible way to use me. And I love that. It's like, can you come in and do like a 20-minute workshop once a week for the next year? She's like, Barbara, I really appreciate the question, but I got to be totally transparent with you. That is a terrible way to use me. Yeah. Instead, what I recommend is, and then we get into the sweet spot offerings and formats that you just talked about.
Yep. Yeah, I will steal that language immediately.
Yes.
I think what I'm much more likely to have said in the past is that is a really interesting solution to a problem I'm very familiar with. May I make another suggestion to someone else?
And I see. Yeah.
I just refer it to someone else.
I think the elegance of this is you still want me, but that is a terrible distribution method for my expertise.
Right.
What's going to have better results for you, for your team, for your company is let's do this together. And then she's off in a much better direction, but they're still paying her.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's some power specifically in my topic area that might be linked to fear and shame. But I have gotten more comfortable saying things like I work with someone with a higher level of commitment to making things better than this is demonstrating.
Yes.
So I understand that you might be in a pickle, right?
Yeah.
And that's great. Let me introduce you to other people who work really well when you're in a pickle.
Totally. Well, as we're landing,
usually they're like, wait, no, we want you. Great. Well, you're going to need to demonstrate a bigger commitment.
There you go. You go. So, we have criteria, and prospects that both meet and do not meet the criteria are attracted by that. So you meet the criteria, come on in. You don't meet the criteria, they're like, oh no, whoa. Yes, I do. And then, can you please let me in? Can we talk one more time? Because as soon as you say thanks, no thanks, you're not serious enough, you're not committed enough. They go, oh no, but, exactly as you said. So having those guardrails around who you're willing to do business with, hugely powerful. And the only business you'll lose is business that you don't want.
Right. I really do think, and David, you, whether you know it or you'll admit it or not, like so many of our hallway conversations, rereading, Do It Marketing, every time I read that book again, I find like 3 new things that I just knock me on side of my head. When I realized, and you are responsible for this, but when I realized that I am one human being, I have zero interest in working 365 days a year.
Yeah.
And there are more ballrooms than I will ever see in any given day. I'm not experiencing scarcity.
Yeah.
There's plenty of work. What I need to do is I need to sift out working with the people that I want to work with and the people I don't want to work with. Now, I'll be honest, right? Like, you know that I don't lie. There are some parts and times of the year where I'm like, you know what? I got to pay that bill, right? Mama needs a new roof. I'd love to. But then I'm going into the wrong fit, knowing that this is the wrong fit and it's going to actually be work. And as soon as I'm done paying off that roof, we're good. Bye-bye. So I do work when I need to work with the wrong people. I do not tell them that they are the wrong people because cash all checks. But when I am not operating from a place of a deficit, I get to pick and choose who I work with. And I'm so joyously privileged to be surrounded by top-notch people who do the similar work in different ways, that it's a gift to be able to give them great people to work with, and I don't have to do it all.
Well, I can't let you go before we dig into one final topic, which as a podcast host, I think is especially valuable to me, but I think it'll be valuable to everyone listening. Listen to others as if they are wise.
Mm-hmm.
Please discuss.
So the way that I would break this down, and I actually was on a podcast this morning and they said, what's one takeaway that listeners could do? And I challenge people, ask a question that you do not know the answer to, because you need to feel in your body what it feels like when you don't know an answer. If you are asking a question you know the answer to, then you are having a transactional BS conversation that is not a connection. There is more information that you do not even know that you do not know, and that is the source of all curiosity. So can you listen to someone as if you do not know the answer? And then as you practice getting comfortable with asking questions you don't know the answer to, then it's a lot easier to listen to someone as if they know themselves.
Yeah.
Can I do this 100% of the time? No. Does that mean some people are not wrong? No, they hella wrong. Wrong. And I can still practice noticing when I think this person may know something I don't know. So the example I often use in my keynotes is I don't know how to cook. So is it possible this person who annoys me to death and I think they are super stupid and they are making tons of mistakes, is it possible that they know a frittata recipe I do not know? Chances are, maybe, right? Yeah. But that's on me to shift how I'm engaging with this person instead of just deciding that they are completely useless.
Yeah.
Are there people in my life that I have decided are completely useless? Yeah, I'm not perfect.
No.
And some of those people I've deemed useless might make great frittatas, and I'm never going to know about it.
Yeah.
So the example I always use is, David, what color socks are you wearing?
Currently, believe it or not, I am not wearing any socks of any kind.
I had no idea. But thank you for that tension moment.
Yeah.
I didn't know the answer. How could I possibly know that answer? So one of the things I talk about in the book is normalizing complexity. And you talked about how like complex DEI is, and on an organizational level, it can just seem completely overwhelming.
Yeah.
But when you really smarten it down, all I'm doing is providing space for new information, which is implied I'm looking for because I asked a question.
Yes.
The answers are endless.
Yeah.
I'm not judging the answer. I'm leaving space for the answer. That's the
Yeah.
practice that we need to do.
Totally amazing. I think that's a great spot to land the plane. Jessica Pettit, tell people how they can get connected and stay connected to more Jessica Pettit brilliance. Where can we get the book, websites, LinkedIn? Where do you want to send people? What should be in the show notes?
All of the places work. Almostdoinggood.com is the website for the book. Most people can't spell my name because there's too many T's and 7 letters. So you can go to goodenoughnow.com, and that's more information about me. I am also on Instagram and LinkedIn and all those things. And I'm a cranky Gen Xer. So scream out the window. There's a good chance I might be able to hear you. Or check your local United Lounge and we'll meet in person.
Very, very nice. Well, so much good stuff happening with the book. You are a force of nature that corporate America is lucky to have in their corner. Thank you for being with us. I appreciate you as a friend and as a maestro of human leadership.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And I wish nothing more than humans being able to lead.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.